TED News Conference continues with State Representative Gregg Amore. He's a Democrat running for Secretary of State. Greg, thanks for coming in.
Appreciate being
Nice
here.
to have you. You've been in politics for a while, right?
A decade.
Yeah.
Been in the General Assembly for a decade, yeah.
Right, local politics and then a state rep as well. You're from East Providence and you proudly call yourself a townie.
I am a townie.
Okay, so why is a townie want to become the Secretary of State?
Well, my background ties into the duties of the office. I'm a history and civics teacher, taught history and civics at East Providence High School for 26 years. I'm now the athletic administrator, so I manage a large organization, 72 employees, $700,000 budget. And in 10 years in the General Assembly, I chaired the Small Business Committee. I chaired the subcommittee in finance on education. I'm on the Finance Committee, vice chair of the Education Committee. These life experiences and professional experiences, I think, have prepared me to enter the office.
Well, let me quiz you a little bit. Now, you've got experience in athletics and finance and politics. How does that fit in with the narrow duties of the Secretary of State? Keep the records. You have election duties separate from the Board of Elections. How do you draw those two together?
So the civic education part is key, right? I taught civics for years and actually took East Providence High School students to Washington for 20 years and immersed them in government project close-up. Across the duties of the office, the chairmanship of the Small Business Committee in the House certainly relates there. And then in regard to elections, I've always been a sponsor, co-sponsor of elections legislation. Early voting, I was a co-sponsor. Let Rhode Island Vote Act, I was the first co-sponsor. So I've been closely tied to voting and expanding voting since I entered the General Assembly.
You've been in the right church then, that's what you're telling us. Okay, now, are there things you can improve? I don't think you're going in just to be a custodian. I assume you're going to go in to approve things?
Sure. I think we can expand civic education. It is my background. I think we have to do a better job of explaining to folks how the system works.
They used to teach it when I went to school.
Yeah, well,
they used to drill it into our heads.
Sure. Well, what we found out, and I'm the sponsor of the Civic Literacy Act, which requires that every Rhode Island high school student have at least one semester of civics. And what we found out in researching that was not the case. So that's now been implemented. It's implemented across the state. So I'd like to expand that. I'd like to make sure that the Department of State is a resource for information. There's been a lot of misinformation about voting. I want to make sure that every Rhode Islander knows how the system works. And we can do that in a whole host of ways. We can do it through social media. We can do it through traditional media. We can do it through me speaking to folks. That's my background. I'm an educator. And I think that's really important because we have to have confidence in our election system or else our democracy is in peril.
Well, a lot of people don't think the system works. They think the system's broken. There are concerns about early voting and ballot harvesting and machines that don't work, right? We just saw in the primary, we had a bunch of, we had a group of machines. I don't want to overplay it. It was a group of machines. There was a problem with the Spanish ballot. It had names from the last election. And then there was finger pointing back and forth. Board of Elections says the Secretary of State made the mistake. She said, no, I didn't. You were following that. What's your take on that?
Sure. So I've actually proposed that the Secretary of State have a non-voting membership on the Board of Elections so that there is constant communication. So the Secretary or designee would be a member of the board, non-voting, because you do want to separate the political from the process. And that would create a cohesion between the two so that these type of things don't happen. In my view, this clearly was a vendor issue, right? It was clearly a testing protocol issue. I've actually had legislation drafted that will set that testing protocol in place for these machines, which are required by federal law. We don't have a choice on these machines. They have to exist. The vendor loaded the wrong information. It appears the ballots were correct, but there was a lack of communication. I think if you have a non-voting member on the board that is either the secretary or their designee, that communication can be shored up.
You face Republican Pat Cortellessa coming up in the general election. Pat was here last week. He said, I want to cut the budget. I may cut the staff, and I want to cut the time for early voting. I wouldn't have it as lengthy as it is now. I think he said 6 days. Let's play Pat Cortellessa. You respond.
I would trim that 20-day to 6 days.
Okay.
Why? Because buyer's remorse. A lot of voters might have had an opportunity to vote early. My opponent technically is looking to do almost 100% mail ballot strategy. Why? That means technically on election day, it's going to be a non-relevant issue. You could have 80% people, voting early or mail ballots.
Well, go ahead. You're his opponent.
So there are two things there, right? First, the early voting. Right now it's 20 days. This is new for us.
Yes.
We should continue to look at it, make sure it works. But to his point, you can vote 6 days out if you'd like.
Yeah.
You can vote 20 days out if you'd like. You can hold on to your ballot till the last day. You can go and vote in person.
Yeah.
You can vote by mail. These are options that really are here so we can expand access to voting.
But you know what he's saying, though, is that people
Yeah,
think
sure.
differently one day, and then as the campaign goes on and draws toward the end, there's a lot of action. I may have voters' remorse. Now, we just saw that possibly in the primary. Governor McKee lost the day of voting to Helena Bonanno folks, but he won mail-in and early ballot. Do you see kind of a little red flag going up?
No, I think all votes are equal, and people have the responsibility for their own vote. I think we're all getting used to early voting, and I believe in early voting. It should be an option because we don't have a traditional work day anymore. And so, and then we have a pandemic, and people are out for 5 days, right? You should have an opportunity to vote when you can, and it should be easy. In regard to buyer's remorse, the voter can decide when they want to cast that ballot. And in our case, you can cast it right up to Election Day.
Okay.
On the mail ballot side of things, I think people will go more and more toward mail ballot. It allows you the option to vote really when you want to. And it allows you to research. You can sit next to your laptop, put the ballot there. You have the voter questions on it. You can take your time. There's no pressure. Many states do this really well, and it enhances voter participation.
Are you concerned, though, about ballot harvesting, where campaign workers can actually get their hands on someone's ballot? And we've heard they go into the nursing homes, and they may go into the senior places and say, oh, no, give me those. I'll take them for you. I'll make sure it gets mailed. Are you concerned about things like that?
Well, the Let Rhode Island Vote Act actually removes the notary and witness signature,
Right.
which promoted ballot harvesting.
Yeah.
That's actually putting a campaign in the room because you need signatures, you need a notary. In some cases, campaigns were hiring notaries. This at least goes back to the Australian ballot, the private ballot, and people can do so as they wish. They have to seal their envelope, they have to sign their envelope, even if they're handing it to somebody to mail for them.
Yeah.
They're trusting that person. Maybe they shouldn't, but it's a better process than what we had in place, which was putting the campaigns in the room based on signature or notary.
Voter ID, just your quick take on that?
Voter ID is something that is embedded in Rhode Island today. Even Democrats at a 70% percentage agree with voter ID.
Okay.
I'm not opposed to voter ID.
And you'd have a budget. Would you like to cut it? Cordelissa says, I want to cut the budget. Maybe lay off if I can, if the staff is bloated. Just about 30 seconds on that.
Yeah, I'd have to get in there, look at the budget, look at the staff, see what the duties are. I mean, it's really difficult to say whether you're going to cut or add when you're not in that position and you haven't studied the budget or the personnel extensively. I think it would be irresponsible to say either way.
All right. You say teaching civics is important. I agree with you. A lot of people don't know how government works. Maybe years ago it was a tougher curriculum or something. I made sure I knew the 3 branches and who does what and how things change. You say it's not working?
I say we have to focus on it. What we did for the past 15 years or so is we've focused on test scores, and those test scores are math and ELA. Right. They're not social studies, and so we've kind of forgotten that, pushed it to the side, and we need to get it back to the forefront.
Well, good luck with that, and thanks for coming in. Good luck with your campaign. Gregg Amore.
Thank you.